A black single dad shared his lunch with a hungry secretary, never imagining that one small act of kindness would spark a storm of secrets, betrayal, and redemption until the day she shocked the world by making him company president. But can compassion alone defeat prejudice and power? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun hadn't yet risen when Derek Collins gently pushed open his daughter's bedroom door. Maya's room was small but filled with warmth. Walls decorated with her artwork and spelling bee certificates, a worn teddy bear watching over her from the bedside table. "Time to wake up, sweetheart," Derek called softly, his deep voice gentle in the quiet morning. Maya stirred under her purple comforter, her curly hair peeking out from beneath. "5 more minutes, Daddy?" she mumbled, pulling the covers tighter. Now, Derek chuckled, flicking on her bedside lamp. "Can't have my spelling bee champion late for school." At the mention of spelling bee, Maya's eyes flew open. She sat up, suddenly alert, her bright brown eyes wide with worry. "The practice bee is today," she said, twisting her blanket in her hands. "That's right," Derek said, sitting on the edge of her bed. The old springs creaked under his weight. "And you're going to do great." While Maya got dressed, Derek headed to their small kitchen. The linoleum floor was cold under his feet, and the overhead light flickered slightly. Another thing he needed to fix when he could afford it. He pulled out the last of the eggs from the carton and some slightly stale bread. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. There was only enough for Maya's breakfast, and payday wasn't until Friday. The smell of toast and eggs soon filled their tiny apartment. Maya appeared in the kitchen, her school uniform neat but showing signs of wear, her backpack clutched in her hands. "Smells good, Daddy," she said, climbing onto one of their mismatched kitchen chairs. Derek set the plate in front of her, watching as she dug in hungrily. He busied himself with washing the pan, trying to ignore the empty feeling in his own stomach. "Aren't you eating?" Maya asked between bites, her fork pausing midway to her mouth. "Already ate while you were getting ready." Derek lied smoothly, keeping his back turned as he dried the dishes. He'd gotten good at these little untruths over the years, protecting Maya from the reality of their situation. The walk to the bus stop was their special time together. The street was quiet, with only a few early morning commuters hurrying past. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched under their feet. "What if I forget how to spell necessary?" Maya asked, her small hand warm in his. "Or accommodate. Those double letters always trick me." Derek squeezed her hand. "Remember what we practiced? Necessary has 1 collar and 2 sleeves." Maya giggled. "And accommodate has 2 cops and 2 murderers." "That's right," Derek smiled, though his heart ached at having to use such analogies. "But most importantly, remember what I always tell you. Take a deep breath and believe in myself." Maya finished, swinging their joined hands. At the bus stop, other children gathered with their parents. Derek noticed how some of the other adults subtly shifted away, clutching their designer handbags closer. He stood straighter, dignity in every line of his body. "Have a wonderful day, baby girl," he said, kneeling to hug Maya goodbye. She smelled of the coconut hair oil he'd carefully applied last night. "You're going to shine in that spelling bee." "Love you, Daddy," Maya whispered, squeezing him tight before climbing onto the yellow school bus. Derek watched until the bus disappeared around the corner, then turned toward the corporate offices where he worked. The gleaming glass building rose 40 stories into the sky, a monument to success he could only dream about. He entered through the service entrance, nodding to security as he collected his cleaning supplies. The morning passed in a blur of mopping floors and emptying trash bins. Derek took pride in his work, making sure every surface gleamed, every corner was spotless. He noticed the small details others missed, the coffee ring on the conference room table, the scuff marks by the elevator. When executives passed by, their expensive shoes clicking on his freshly mopped floors, few bothered to look his way. Those who did often looked through him, as if he were just another piece of furniture. One man in an expensive suit stepped directly onto the wet floor, despite the warning sign, leaving a trail of footprints in his wake. Sorry about that, a young secretary whispered to Derek as she hurried past, but the executive didn't even pause. Derek simply nodded and began mopping again. He'd learned long ago that dignity didn't come from other people's recognition. It came from within. By evening, his feet ached and his stomach felt hollow, but he held his head high as he walked home. The apartment was quiet when he entered, Maya already working on her homework at the kitchen table. "How did the spelling bee go?" he asked, hanging up his jacket. Maya's face lit up. "I made it to the finals, Daddy. Next week is the real competition. That's my girl." Derek gathered her in a hug, his heart swelling with pride. "I knew you could do it." While Maya finished her homework, Derek scraped together their evening meal. There was only a little rice left in the container, and he divided it unevenly, making sure Maya's bowl was full while taking just enough for himself to keep the gnawing hunger at bay. "Daddy?" Maya asked as she watched him eat his meager portion. "Are you sure you don't want more?" "No, baby, I'm fine," Derek assured her, forcing a smile. "Just tired from work." Later, as Maya hugged him goodnight, her arms wrapped tight around his neck, Derek held her close, breathing in the familiar coconut scent of her hair. "You're the best daddy in the whole world," she murmured sleepily. Derek swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. "And you're the best daughter," he whispered back. After tucking her in, he sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at his empty bowl. His stomach growled loudly in the quiet apartment, but he ignored it. Tomorrow would be another day of dignity in the face of invisibility, of pride despite poverty, of love conquering all else. For Maya, he would endure anything. For Maya, he would remain strong. The corporate break room buzzed with the usual lunchtime chatter. Well-dressed executives clustered around the sleek tables, their designer lunch bags and takeout containers spread before them. Derek Collins moved quietly among them, emptying trash bins and wiping down vacant tables with practiced efficiency. He'd learned long ago how to become almost invisible as he worked, a skill that made others more comfortable and his job easier. The scent of his humble lunch, 2 pieces of leftover fried chicken and a square of cornbread wrapped in foil, drifted from his pocket, reminding him of the meal he'd have to wait another hour to eat. As the lunch crowd thinned, something caught his attention, a sound that didn't belong among the casual conversation and chair scraping. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a potted plant, sat a woman with her head bowed. Her shoulders trembled slightly as she tried to muffle her sobs. Derek recognized her as Claire Anderson, one of the secretaries from the 4th floor. He'd often seen her offering kind words to the cleaning staff, unlike many others in the building. Now she sat alone, her desktop calendar open before her, but her pen lay untouched as tears fell onto the pages. He hesitated, conscious of his position, but something in her obvious distress pulled at his heart. Moving closer, he spoke softly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Claire started, quickly wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She tried to smile but failed. "I'm fine, really, just having a rough day." Derek noticed her empty table, devoid of any lunch. The clock showed 12:30 p.m., well into the lunch hour. "Haven't eaten yet?" he asked gently. Claire's lip trembled. She stared down at her hands, twisting a tissue between her fingers. Her voice cracked. "My ex-husband somehow got access to my account. Cleaned it out completely. I won't get paid until next week, and She stopped, embarrassed. Derek felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same one he got when Maya needed new shoes, but the budget was tight. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wrapped lunch. "It's not much," he said, placing the foil package on the table. "But my mama always said sharing makes any meal taste better." Claire looked up, her eyes wide. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "Please," Derek insisted quietly. "My daughter made extra chicken last night. She'd be proud to know it helped someone." With trembling hands, Claire unwrapped the foil. The aroma of perfectly seasoned fried chicken filled the air. "Your daughter cooks?" Derek smiled, pulling up a chair. "Maya's 10, but she insists on helping in the kitchen. Says she wants to take care of me like I take care of her. Pride warmed his voice. Claire picked up a piece of chicken, taking a small bite. Her eyes closed in appreciation. "This is wonderful," she said softly. After another bite, she looked at Derek. "But what about you? You need to eat too." He shook his head. "I had a big breakfast," he lied smoothly, the same way he did when sharing his portion with Maya on tight weeks. As Claire ate, they talked. She told him about her divorce, the betrayal that had left her starting over at 38. Derek shared stories about raising Maya alone after his wife's passing, about keeping faith even when times got tough. "Sometimes," Claire said, carefully breaking the cornbread in half despite Derek's protests. "I wonder if there's any good left in people. Then something like this happens." She gestured at the shared meal. "And I remember their island. Goods everywhere," Derek replied, watching her enjoy the food. "Just got to be quiet enough to notice it sometimes." The lunch hour drew to a close. Claire took the last bite of cornbread, dabbing her eyes with a fresh tissue. "Mr. Collins," she said earnestly, "I won't forget this. What you did today, it means more than you know." Derek stood, straightening his janitor's uniform. "Just doing what's right, ma'am." He offered a quiet smile and returned to his cart, resuming his rounds as the afternoon crowd began filtering back into the break room. The morning sun streamed through the tall office windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors that Derek had cleaned hours earlier. He pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, focused on a coffee stain he'd spotted near the water cooler. "Derek, good morning." Claire Anderson's warm voice echoed through the corridor. She hurried toward him, her heels clicking against the tile, with a tall man in an expensive suit following behind her. Derek straightened up, offering a gentle smile. "Good morning, Miss Anderson. Please, I told you to call me Claire," she said, her eyes bright with genuine friendliness. She gestured to the distinguished-looking executive beside her. "This is Mr. Hughes, my supervisor. I was just telling him about you." Mr. Hughes barely glanced at Derek, his attention fixed on his smartphone. Claire pressed on, undeterred. "Mr. Hughes, this is Derek Collins, the man I was mentioning, the kindest person in this entire building. Just yesterday, he shared his lunch with me when I was having a rough day." Hughes looked up briefly, his expression distant. "Ah, yes, the janitor." He gave a curt nod before returning to his phone. "Claire, we need to review those quarterly reports before the 10 o'clock meeting." Derek maintained his dignified posture, though his eyes reflected a flicker of hurt. "Nice to meet you, sir," he said quietly. Claire shot Hughes a disappointed look before turning back to Derek. "Thank you again for yesterday. It meant more than you know." As Hughes strode away, Claire lingered for a moment. She watched Derek return to his work, noting how he kept his head high despite the obvious dismissal. There was something special about him, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate from within. Later that afternoon, Claire sat at her desk, processing paperwork when an internal memo caught her eye. She read it twice, her excitement growing. There was an opening for a night shift clerk in the accounting department. The position required basic computer skills and attention to detail, skills she knew Derek possessed from their conversation yesterday. She glanced around before quietly printing out an application form. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded it neatly and slipped it into her purse. This could be Derek's chance for something better. She found him later that day, cleaning the windows in the east wing. "Derek, do you have a minute?" He set down his cleaning supplies. "Of course, Miss Claire." He corrected himself with a small smile. Claire pulled out the application. "I saw this posting for a night shift clerk position. The pay is better, and it comes with full benefits." She held out the paper. "I think you should apply." Derek's expression shifted from surprise to uncertainty. "I appreciate the thought, but," he gestured to his janitor's uniform, "I don't think they're looking for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Claire's voice was firm but kind. "You mean someone honest, hardworking, and intelligent? Because that's exactly what they need." She pressed the application into his hands. "Just think about it, okay?" Derek looked down at the paper, his fingers running along its crisp edges. "I don't want to waste anyone's time." "You wouldn't be," Claire insisted. You have real-world experience, Derek. You understand people. That's worth more than any fancy degree. She touched his arm gently. Promise me you'll at least consider it? After a long moment, Derek carefully folded the application and tucked it into his pocket. I'll think about it, he said softly. That evening, Derek sat at his small kitchen table, the application spread out before him. The sounds of Maya doing homework drifted from the living room. He stared at the form, reading the requirements over and over. The position asked for a high school diploma, which he had, and basic computer skills, which he'd taught himself at the library. But doubt still gnawed at him. What's that, Daddy? Maya appeared beside him, peering at the paper with curiosity. Just some paperwork, baby, he said, trying to slide it away. But Maya's quick eyes had already scanned the page. A new job? Her face lit up. That's awesome. Are you going to apply? Derek sighed, running a hand over his face. I don't know, Maya. It's complicated. Why? She climbed into the chair next to him, her expression serious beyond her years. You're the smartest person I know, and you always tell me to try my best, even when things seem hard. This is different, he started. But Maya shook her head. No, it's not, she said firmly, sounding so much like her mother that it made his heart ache. Remember what you told me before my spelling bee? You'll never know unless you try. She pushed the application back toward him. Just try, Daddy. Derek looked at his daughter's earnest face, then back at the application. The words, equal opportunity employer, stood out at the bottom of the page. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe Claire was right. Perhaps it was time to try for something more. Derek adjusted his navy blue tie for the 10th time as he stood in front of the office building. The second-hand suit he wore felt stiff and a size too large, but it was the best he could find at the thrift store. His worn dress shoes, polished to a shine that morning, reflected the afternoon Sunday. He checked his watch, still 15 minutes early. Taking a deep breath, he remembered Maya's words from that morning. You're the smartest daddy in the world. You can do anything. The memory of her gap-toothed smile gave him courage. Inside the lobby, the security guard, Bill, who always greeted him warmly during his early morning shifts, did a double take. Mr. Collins? Almost didn't recognize you, looking sharp. Thanks, Bill. Got an interview upstairs. Well, knock 'em dead, sir. As Derek waited for the elevator, he noticed Claire trying to appear casual near the potted plants, pretending to sort through files. When their eyes met, she gave him a quick thumbs up before ducking behind her folder. The gesture made his throat tight with emotion. The elevator carried him to the 4th floor, where the executive offices lined the walls. How many times had he emptied these trash bins, wiped these windows, vacuumed these carpets? Now he was here for something entirely different. Outside the conference room, Derek paused to steady his nerves. Through the glass, he could see 3 people seated at the long table: Mr. Hughes, the department head, Miss Rodriguez from Human Resources, and Mr. Peterson, the night shift supervisor. Taking one final deep breath, Derek knocked on the door. Come in, called Mr. Hughes. The room felt different from this side of the table. Derek had cleaned it countless times in the pre-dawn hours, but now the afternoon light gave everything a different quality. He took the seat they offered, careful not to let the oversized jacket bunch up awkwardly. Mr. Collins, Miss Rodriguez began, consulting her papers. You've been with us as part of the maintenance staff for 5 years. Yes, ma'am. 5 years and 4 months. Mr. Peterson leaned forward. And what makes you think you're qualified for a clerk position? Derek felt sweat prickle at his collar, but kept his voice steady. Well, sir, I've spent those 5 years watching how this company works. I see the night shift operations from the ground up. Could you elaborate? Mr. Hughes asked, his tone neutral. Take the shipping department, for instance, Derek said, warming to the subject. I notice the night crew often struggles with inventory because the computer system updates at midnight, right when they're busiest. I've watched them waste time hunting for packages that were moved but not logged. If we adjusted the update schedule to 2 a.m. instead, it would smooth out their workflow considerably. The panel exchanged glances. Miss Rodriguez made a note on her pad. And what other observations have you made? Mr. Peterson asked, his earlier skepticism giving way to curiosity. The break room on the third floor has a broken vending machine that's been causing problems for months. The repair company keeps replacing parts, but I've noticed it only malfunctions when the temperature drops below 68 degrees. The night crew cranks up the AC because of all the physical work they do. If we moved that machine to the warmer first-floor lobby, we'd save on repair costs and keep the workers happy. Mr. Hughes sat back in his chair, studying Derek with new interest. Those are some surprisingly detailed insights, Mr. Collins. When you work the quiet hours, sir, you notice things. And I've always believed that no matter what job you do, you should try to make things better where you can. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. They tested his basic computer knowledge, which Maya had helped him practice on their old laptop. They asked about his education. He'd earned his GED while working 2 jobs as a young man. Through it all, Derek maintained his dignity and spoke honestly about both his limitations and his willingness to learn. "One last question," Miss Rodriguez said. "Why do you want this position?" Derek thought of Maya, of all the nights he'd helped her with homework after his shift, of their shared dreams of something better. "Because I believe in hard work and making the most of opportunities. Because I want to show my daughter that where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. And because I know I can make a real contribution to this company given the chance." The panel thanked him professionally, their faces giving nothing away. As Derek stood to leave, his chair squeaked against the floor. The same squeak he'd tried to fix with oil last month during his cleaning rounds. In the hallway, Claire was waiting by the water cooler, attempting to look busy. When Derek approached, she straightened up and extended her hand formally, aware of watching eyes through the glass walls. "Thank you for coming in today, Mr. Collins," she said loudly enough to be heard, but her eyes sparkled with encouragement. Derek shook her hand, understanding the professional facade. "Thank you for your time, Miss Anderson." Outside, the early evening air felt cool on his face. Streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting gentle pools of light on the sidewalk. Derek looked up at the building where he'd worked so many pre-dawn hours. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, stirring in his chest, hope. Touching the tie Maya had helped him knot that morning, Derek allowed himself a small, quiet smile before heading home to his daughter. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Sterling Associates, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Derek Collins worked methodically, pushing his mop in practiced figure-eights across the marble tiles. The familiar motion brought him comfort after the nervous energy of yesterday's interview. He'd almost finished the east wing when voices drifted from a partially open office door. The deep tones belonged to executives he recognized. Mr. Peterson and Mr. Peterson, Richardson, both senior vice presidents. "So what did you think of the candidates?" Mr. Peterson asked. "Most were solid choices. That MBA from Princeton showed promise." There was a pause, followed by the clink of ice in a glass. "Though I have to say, Collins surprised me." Derek's hands stilled on the mop handle. He knew he shouldn't listen, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. "The janitor?" Mr. Peterson's voice held a note of disbelief. "I'll admit, his answers about improving efficiency were unexpected." "He showed real insight," Mr. Richardson said. 20 years of watching this place operate from ground level, he sees things we miss." "Come on, John. A janitor in the president's office? Let's not be ridiculous." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. He gripped the mop handle tighter, his knuckles turning white. "Besides," Peterson continued, lowering his voice, "he doesn't fit the image. Our clients expect a certain profile. You understand what I mean. If you're suggesting what I think you are, I'm just being realistic, Sterling. Associates has a reputation to maintain." Derek's throat felt tight. The coded meaning was clear as crystal. His skin color made him unsuitable. The same old story, dressed up in careful corporate language. "Think about it," Peterson pressed on. "The board would never approve. Better to let him down easy now than waste everyone's time." Unable to listen anymore, Derek wheeled his cart away, the squeaking wheels echoing in the empty hallway. His chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside. All those nights studying business magazines in the library, all those dreams of something better, they seemed foolish now. In the janitor's closet, he stared at his reflection in the small mirror above the sink. The face looking back at him was tired, lined with years of early mornings and late nights. What had he been thinking? A janitor reaching for an executive position? Peterson was right. It was ridiculous. His hand moved to the application copy in his back pocket, ready to crumple it and toss it in the trash. But then Maya's voice echoed in his memory. "Just try, Daddy. You always tell me not to give up." The memory of her face, so full of faith in him, made his hand fall away from the paper. Maya deserved a father who lived up to her belief in him. If he gave up now, what message would that send to his little girl? Hours later, Derek pushed open the door to their small apartment. The smell of boxed mac and cheese, Maya's cooking attempt, filled the air. His daughter's homework was spread across their scratched coffee table, math worksheets mixed with spelling lists. "Daddy!" Maya launched herself at him for their nightly hug. "Did they tell you about the job yet?" "Not yet, baby." He managed to keep his voice steady. "These things take time." Maya nodded sagely, as if she understood all about corporate hiring practices. "I bet they're just making sure they pick the very best person." She tugged him toward her bedroom. "Will you tuck me in?" In her small room, decorated with second-hand furniture and carefully preserved drawings, Maya climbed into bed. Her worn teddy bear, a gift from her mother, sat faithfully on the pillow. "When you get the job," Maya said sleepily as he pulled up her butterfly-patterned comforter, "will you wear a tie to work every day?" The innocent question made his throat tighten. "Maybe someday, sweet pea. You'll look so handsome," she yawned. "Like those men in the fancy offices." Derek forced a smile, smoothing her curly hair back from her forehead. "Time for sleep now. Night, Daddy. Love you. Love you too, baby girl." Maya snuggled down, clutching her teddy bear. Derek sat there for a moment, watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight. His daughter's unshakable faith in him was both a blessing and a burden. She saw no barriers, no limitations, just her daddy, who she believed could do anything. Standing in her doorway, Derek watched her drift off to sleep. Her small form rose and fell with each breath, reminding him of all he had to fight for. Peterson's words still stung, but Maya's dream of seeing him in a tie somehow hurt more. It was such a simple wish to see her father rise above his circumstances, to wear the symbol of success she noticed on other men. He closed her door quietly, leaving it cracked just how she liked it. The weight of the day's revelations pressed down on his shoulders, but Maya's innocent hope kept him from crumbling beneath it. The Monday morning sun had barely risen when Derek pushed through the heavy glass doors of Sterling Associates. His worn boots squeaked against the polished floor, the same floor he'd mopped countless times before. But today was different. His heart thumped as he made his way to Human Resources. Miss Peterson, the HR manager, waited behind her desk with a stack of papers. Her smile seemed forced as she gestured to the chair across from her. "Mr. Collins, please sit." Derek lowered himself into the chair, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The office felt smaller than when he cleaned it last week. "Well," Miss Peterson said, shuffling through the papers, "despite some concerns from certain board members, you've been selected for the night clerk position." She slid the paperwork toward him. "Your experience with the building's operations and—" She paused, checking her notes. "Your practical problem-solving approach impressed enough of the hiring committee." Derek's fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the pen. Could this really be happening? As he signed his name on each marked line, he thought of Maya's face when he'd tell her tonight. A knock at the door made them both look up. Claire stood there, holding a manila folder, her eyes brightening when she saw Derek. "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, but her wide smile gave away her excitement. "I just needed to drop these off." Miss Peterson took the folder with a curt nod. "Thank you, Miss Anderson." Claire lingered a moment longer than necessary, giving Derek a quick thumbs up behind Miss Peterson's back before slipping away. Later, in the break room, she confessed to putting in a good word with several committee members, describing his kindness and work ethic in detail. "You earned this, Derek," Claire insisted, stirring her coffee. "I just made sure they saw what I see." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of orientation sessions and paperwork. By lunch, word had spread through the office. Derek felt the stares as he walked the halls, no longer in his janitor's uniform but in his best button-down shirt and carefully pressed slacks. Two young executives whispered as he passed their cubicles. "Isn't that the janitor?" one muttered. "Guess they're really pushing diversity hiring," the other replied with a smirk. Derek kept his head high, remembering Maya's words from breakfast that morning. "You're the smartest daddy in the world." Her faith in him burned brighter than any doubt others could cast. At 3 o'clock, he attended his first staff meeting. The conference room fell quiet as he entered, several employees shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Mr. Hughes, who would be his direct supervisor, barely glanced up from his phone. "Take a seat anywhere," Hughes said flatly. Derek chose a spot near the back, pulling out a fresh notebook. He noticed how the chairs on either side of him remained empty even as the room filled up, but one person chose to sit beside him. Claire, arriving last with an armful of files, dropped into the chair next to his with a friendly smile. The meeting dragged on, full of corporate jargon Derek promised himself he'd learn. He took careful notes, his handwriting neat and determined. When Hughes mentioned quarterly reports, Derek saw several heads turn his way, as if expecting confusion on his face. He kept his expression neutral, though his pen pressed a little harder into the paper. After the meeting, Claire caught up with him in the hallway. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly. "Half of them couldn't handle your job for a day." Derek nodded, grateful for her support. "I'm just focused on learning everything I can." "That's why you'll succeed," Claire replied. "Oh, and congratulations on the new desk. It's right around the corner from mine." His new workspace was modest, a small cubicle with a computer that had seen better days. But to Derek, it felt like a throne room. He ran his hand along the desk's surface, remembering how many times he'd dusted similar ones. Now, he had his own. The afternoon shift ended, and Derek headed home to prepare for his first night shift, starting at 11 p.m. Maya was already waiting at the door when he arrived, practically bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, did you use your new desk? Did you have important meetings? Did you wear your tie all day?" Derek scooped her up in a hug, her enthusiasm washing away the day's tensions. "Sure did, baby girl. Your daddy's got his own computer now, and everything." Over their early dinner of spaghetti, Maya peppered him with questions about his new job. Her eyes shone with pride when he described his cubicle, making it sound like the finest office in the building. "Can I see it sometime?" she asked, twirling pasta on her fork. "Soon," he promised, "once I learn everything I need to know." After tucking Maya in with her grandmother, who'd agreed to night sit, Derek sat at their small kitchen table. The clock showed 9:30 p.m., still time before his shift. He spread out 3 worn business textbooks he'd borrowed from the library, their pages marked with sticky notes. The books looked intimidating: Business Administration Basics, Corporate Communications, and Introduction to Finance. But Derek thought of Maya's proud face, of Claire's encouraging smile, of all the doubting looks he'd prove wrong. He opened the first book, grabbed a notepad, and began to read. In the quiet of his kitchen, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator for company, Derek Collins started his journey. Every word he read, every note he took, was another step away from the man who'd mopped these offices and toward the man he knew he could become. Derek's new schedule felt like trying to squeeze 2 lives into one day. Every evening at 5, he'd rush home from his clerk training to help Maya with her homework before heading back for his night shift. His small apartment kitchen became command central, math worksheets and spelling lists spread across the scratched wooden table while dinner simmered on the stove. "Sound it out, sweetheart," Derek encouraged Maya as she wrestled with a particularly tough word. The kitchen clock showed 6:15 p.m., and he still needed to iron his shirt for work. But Maya's determined face kept him anchored to his chair. "Perseverance," Maya spelled carefully, then broke into a wide grin. "Like what you're doing, Daddy. Mrs. Thompson taught us that word today." Derek's throat tightened with emotion. That's right, baby girl. And you just spelled it perfectly. He glanced at the clock again and stood up. Now, let me get ready for work while you finish those last few problems. In his tiny bedroom, Derek changed into his new work clothes. Crisp white shirt, navy tie, and pressed slacks from the thrift store. The fabric felt foreign against his skin after years of wearing a janitor's uniform. He straightened his tie in the mirror, trying to look the part of a corporate clerk. The night shift at Sterling Associates was different from the daytime bustle. The halls echoed with emptiness, and the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows. Derek sat at his small desk in the corner of the records department, methodically entering data and learning the company's filing system. Well, look who thinks he's executive material, a voice sneered one night. Tommy, a young intern working late, leaned against Derek's cubicle wall. Aren't you a little old to be starting at the bottom? Derek kept his eyes on his computer screen, his fingers steady on the keyboard. Evening, Tommy, he said quietly, refusing to let the barb sink in. The whispers followed him through the halls. How did he even get this job? Probably some diversity initiative. He'll never fit in here. Each comment stung, but Derek remembered Maya's proud face when he'd first told her about his new position. During his breaks, Derek studied the company manual and business terminology, making careful notes in a worn spiral notebook. The words sometimes blurred together after hours of reading, but he pressed on. Claire became his bright spot in the long nights. She often stayed late, bringing him coffee and sitting with him during his midnight break. Don't let them get to you, she said one night, sliding a steaming cup across the break room table. They're just scared because you're different. You actually care about doing good work, not just climbing the ladder. Derek wrapped his hands around the warm cup. I keep telling myself that, but sometimes. He trailed off, thinking of the way people's eyes slid past him in meetings, as if he were still invisible. Sometimes it feels like pushing a boulder uphill, Claire finished for him. Trust me, I know that feeling. But you're stronger than they are, Derek. I see it every day. The week dragged on, each night a test of endurance. Derek learned to tune out the whispers, focusing instead on mastering his new tasks. He discovered he had a knack for spotting patterns in the data, finding errors that others had missed. By Friday night, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. His eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, and his shoulders ached from hunching over the keyboard. But there was pride, too. Pride in every completed task, every new skill learned. When he got home just before dawn on Saturday, he found Maya asleep at the kitchen table. Spelling flashcards were scattered around her, and her face was peaceful in the gray morning light. One card had slipped from her fingers, the word perseverance, written in her careful handwriting. Derek stood watching his daughter sleep, his tie loose around his neck. The week's hurts and frustrations melted away at the sight of her faith in him, written in pencil on those flashcards. He gently scooped Maya up, her small body warm and trusting against his chest. "Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily as he carried her to bed. "I'm here, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm right here." He tucked her in, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. The morning sun was beginning to paint the walls gold, and despite his exhaustion, Derek felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. He'd made it through his first week. He'd withstood the doubts and sneers, kept his dignity intact. Maya snuggled deeper into her pillow, the flashcards forgotten on the kitchen table. Derek sat on the edge of her bed, watching his daughter's peaceful breathing. In that moment, every sacrifice, every whispered insult, every long night felt worth it. This was why he persevered, not for himself, but for the little girl who believed in him without question. The morning light grew stronger, but Derek couldn't bring himself to move just yet. Let the world outside wait a little longer. Right now, in this quiet moment with his sleeping daughter, he had all the strength he needed to face another week. Saturday mornings at Morris & Associates were quieter than weekdays. The usual bustle of ringing phones and clicking heels had been replaced by a peaceful stillness that filled the hallways. Derek sat at his small desk in the corner of the records room, surrounded by stacks of files he was organizing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he carefully logged each document into the system. A gentle knock on the doorframe made him look up. Claire stood there holding 2 paper bags from Joe's diner down the street, a warm smile lighting up her face. She wore casual weekend clothes, jeans, and a soft blue sweater, instead of her usual office attire. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, stepping into the room. "Consider this my way of paying back that lunch you shared with me." Derek's eyes widened in surprise. "You didn't have to do that, Miss Anderson." "Claire," she corrected him gently. "And I wanted to. Besides, everyone needs a lunch break, even dedicated clerks who work weekends." She pulled up a spare chair and began unpacking the bags. 2 thick sandwiches, crispy fries, and 2 bottles of cola. The aroma of fresh baked bread and grilled meat filled the small office. "This is too much," Derek protested, but his stomach betrayed him with a quiet growl. Claire laughed. "Your stomach disagrees. Come on, take a break. These files will still be here in 30 minutes. Derek carefully moved some papers aside to make room. As they settled in to eat, Claire noticed the business management textbook partially hidden under some folders. "You're studying?" she asked, unwrapping her sandwich. Derek nodded, a hint of self-consciousness crossing his face. "Every spare moment. There's so much to learn, and I don't want to give anyone a reason to say I can't handle this job." "I understand that feeling," Claire said softly. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "After my divorce, when I had to start over, I felt like I had to work twice as hard to prove myself. Like everyone was just waiting for me to fail." Derek looked up, meeting her eyes. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Claire took a slow breath. "My ex-husband was a charmer. He convinced me to put everything in joint accounts, said it was about trust. Then one day, I came home to find the accounts empty and him gone." She gave a sad smile. "The worst part wasn't even losing the money. It was all those people who'd warned me, looking at me like they'd expected it all along." "I'm sorry," Derek said quietly. "People can be cruel when you're down. They sure can be." Claire took a sip of her cola. "What about you, Maya's mother?" A shadow passed over Derek's face. "Cancer. Maya was only 3. Some days it feels like a lifetime ago. Other days." He trailed off, absently turning his wedding ring. "She must have been special. Sarah was amazing. Strongest person I ever knew. Even at the end, she was more worried about us than herself." Derek's voice grew soft with memory. "She made me promise to give Maya the best life possible. That's what keeps me going, even when things get tough here." Claire nodded understanding. "Is that why you took this job? For Maya?" "Partly," Derek admitted. "But also for myself. I spent years being invisible, watching people look right through me while I cleaned their offices. I want to prove that a person's worth isn't decided by their starting point. The way some people here treat you, it makes me angry," Claire said, her voice taking on an edge. "I've seen how they whisper, how they act like you don't belong. I notice more than they think," Derek said with a slight smile. "But I learned long ago that the best response to prejudice is excellence. Maya tells me that's from Michelle Obama." Claire laughed. "Smart girl, you're Maya. Too smart sometimes," Derek chuckled. "She keeps me honest, that's for sure." They continued talking as they ate, sharing stories about their lives, their struggles, and their hopes. Claire told him about rebuilding her life after the divorce, about learning to trust her own judgment again. Derek shared tales of raising Maya alone, of working multiple jobs to make ends meet, of teaching his daughter to hold her head high no matter what. The 30-minute break stretched to an hour, neither of them noticing the time passing. There was an ease to their conversation, a natural flow that made it feel like they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. As Claire gathered the lunch wrappings, she paused. "You know, when you shared your lunch with me that day, it wasn't just about the food. It was the first time in months someone had shown me real kindness without wanting anything in return." "Sometimes a little kindness is all it takes to keep going," Derek replied softly. Claire smiled, touching his arm briefly. "Well, I'm glad you're here now. This place needs more people like you." After Claire left, Derek found himself working with renewed energy. The afternoon passed quickly, and before he knew it, the setting sun was casting long shadows through the office windows. When he finally arrived home that evening, he found Maya curled up on their worn couch, pretending to read but clearly waiting up for him. She peered over her book with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You're late, Daddy," she said, trying to sound casual. "Were you talking to that nice secretary lady again?" Derek hung up his jacket, shaking his head with amusement. "And how would you know about Miss Anderson?" "Claire," Maya corrected, mimicking Claire's earlier tone perfectly. "I heard you say her name on the phone, and you smile different when you talk about her." "I smile different, do I?" Derek raised an eyebrow, fighting back a grin. "Uh-huh." Maya nodded sagely. "Like in those movies where the guy likes the girl but doesn't want to say it." Derek laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled their small apartment. "Oh, is that what's happening?" Maya just grinned and went back to her book, leaving her father to ponder her words as he headed to the kitchen to start dinner. Monday morning arrived with its usual bustle at the corporate office, but something was different. The typical hum of activity had an edge of tension to it. Derek, who had just finished organizing some files at his clerk desk, noticed executives hurrying past with worried expressions. Through the thin walls of the conference room next door, raised voices carried clearly. "This is a disaster. If we can't get those parts at a reasonable price, the whole project falls apart." Derek paused in his work, listening carefully. He recognized Mr. Hughes's voice among others. "Our current supplier just doubled their rates," another voice added. "We can't afford that kind of increase, but finding a new supplier could take months." Derek's mind began working. During his years as a janitor, he'd gotten to know many of the delivery drivers who came through the loading dock. One in particular, Old Joe, often talked about his brother's manufacturing business just outside the city. Claire appeared at his desk with some paperwork, noticing his thoughtful expression. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Those parts they're worried about," Derek said slowly. "I think I might know a solution." Claire's eyes widened. "Really? You should tell them." Derek shook his head. "They won't want to hear from me. I'm just the new clerk, remember? But if you can help," Claire insisted. Just then, Mr. Hughes stormed out of the conference room, looking frustrated. He headed for the break room, and Claire gave Derek a gentle push. "Now's your chance. Just casually mention it." Derek's heart pounded as he followed Mr. Hughes. In the break room, he pretended to be getting coffee while the executive angrily stabbed at the vending machine. "Excuse me, Mr. Hughes," Derek said quietly. "I couldn't help overhearing about the supplier issue." Hughes turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. "This doesn't concern you, Collins." "I understand, sir," Derek said respectfully. "But I know someone local who might be able to help. Joe Martinez's brother runs quality manufacturing just outside town. They do custom metal work, and their prices are reasonable because there's no shipping costs." Hughes paused, his hand hovering over his coffee cup. "Martinez? The delivery driver?" "Yes, sir. His brother Tommy's been in business 20 years. I used to talk to Joe when Derek hesitated, then continued. "When I worked maintenance, he mentioned they're always looking for new contracts." Mr. Hughes studied Derek with new interest. "Do you have any details about their capabilities?" "I can get them, sir. Joe gave me his brother's business card months ago." Back at his desk, Claire watched as Derek pulled out a worn business card from his wallet. She smiled encouragingly as he wrote down everything he knew about Tommy Martinez's business. "You should type it up properly," Claire suggested. "Make it look professional." Derek spent his lunch break carefully formatting the information, adding details about potential cost savings and faster delivery times. His hands trembled slightly as he printed the document. Claire reviewed it, her eyes bright. "This is good, Derek. Really good. The numbers make sense. Maybe too good," Derek mumbled. "What if I'm wrong? What if I'm overstepping?" "You're trying to help," Claire said firmly. "That's never wrong." Throughout the afternoon, word spread about Derek's suggestion. He heard snippets of conversation as executives passed his desk, some dismissive, others intrigued. Mr. Hughes had apparently shared the proposal with the board. Around 4 o'clock, Claire rushed to his desk, excitement on her face. They're calling Tommy Martinez right now. I heard Mr. Hughes on the phone. Derek tried to focus on his work, but his stomach was in knots. He'd put himself out there, and now all he could do was wait. At 6, most employees had gone home. Derek was finishing up some filing when Mr. Hughes appeared at his desk. "Collins," he said, his tone unreadable. "We spoke with Tommy Martinez. His rates are exactly as you suggested, and he can start supplying parts next week." Derek nodded carefully. "I'm glad I could help, sir." "Yes, well." Hughes cleared his throat. "Good initiative. Keep up the good work." He walked away stiffly. Claire, who had stayed late to support Derek, broke into a wide smile. "You did it. You actually did it." Derek gathered his things, his mind swimming. "I still can't believe they listened." "They listened because it was a brilliant idea," Claire said. "You saw a solution nobody else could see." Outside, the night sky stretched above them, stars barely visible through the city lights. Claire touched his arm gently. "You should be proud, Derek." But as Derek walked home, his emotions were mixed. Yes, his idea had worked, but would this draw too much attention? Would some executives resent his intervention? He thought of Maya, of her dreams for him to succeed, and of his own dreams of proving himself. The streetlights cast long shadows as he walked, hope and fear dancing in his heart. He'd taken a risk today, stepped out of his carefully maintained place. Only time would tell if it had been the right choice. His footsteps echoed on the quiet sidewalk as he made his way home, carrying the weight of his small victory and all its possible consequences. Claire paced back and forth in the empty break room, her heels clicking against the tiles. "Okay, Derek, let's go through it one more time. Pretend I'm the board." Derek stood near the coffee machine, tugging at his borrowed tie. The dark blue fabric felt like it was choking him. "Claire, I don't know about this." "Yes, you do." She stopped and faced him, her expression stern but kind. "You know this plan inside and out. You've lived it. Now straighten that tie and show me what you're going to tell them." Taking a deep breath, Derek nodded and squared his shoulders. "The current supplier charges us triple for parts because they're shipped from overseas. But I know Jackson's Metalworks, just 20 minutes from here. They've been in business for 30 years, and their quality is just as good." "And how do you know that?" Claire prompted, playing her role as a skeptical executive. "Because I worked maintenance jobs all over this city. I've seen their parts in action. They last longer than the imported ones, and if there's ever a problem, you can drive right over and talk to Mr. Jackson himself." Derek's voice grew stronger as he spoke about things he understood firsthand. Claire smiled encouragingly. "That's perfect. Keep that confidence when you're in there." The boardroom door felt heavier than usual as Derek pushed it open. 12 faces turned to stare at him, executives in expensive suits, looking both curious and impatient. Mr. Hughes sat at the head of the table, checking his watch. "Mr. Collins," Hughes said, "we understand you have a proposal regarding our supply chain issues." Derek's hands trembled slightly as he distributed the simple handouts Claire had helped him prepare. He could feel the weight of their judgment, their assumptions about the former janitor trying to play businessman. But then he remembered Maya's face, her absolute faith in him, and found his voice. "Yes, sir. I believe I have a solution that could save the company nearly $2 million annually." He launched into his explanation, pointing out the local advantages of Jackson's Metalworks. As he spoke, he noticed several executives leaning forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest. "The quality difference," one executive began, "is actually in our favor," Derek cut in respectfully, pulling a sample part from his pocket. "This is from Jackson's, been in use for 5 years. Compare it to our current supplier's 3-year sample." He passed both pieces around the table. The room grew quiet as the executives examined the parts. Derek continued, laying out transportation costs, response times for repairs, and the benefits of supporting local business. His words weren't fancy, but they carried the weight of real experience. "And you discovered this through your previous work?" A woman at the far end asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "Yes, ma'am. Sometimes the best solutions are right in our backyard, if we're willing to look. Mr. Hughes leaned back, a thoughtful expression replacing his usual stern look. The savings are significant, and the quality appears superior. Mr. Collins, this island, impressive work. Sudden applause started from one corner and spread around the table. Derek stood straighter, warmth spreading through his chest as he saw genuine respect in their eyes for the first time. "I move we implement Mr. Collins's proposal immediately," said the woman who had questioned him earlier, "and perhaps we should consider him for the supply chain committee." More nods around the table. Mr. Hughes actually smiled. "Agreed. Mr. Collins, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll need you to work with purchasing to make this transition happen." Leaving the boardroom, Derek found Claire waiting anxiously in the hallway. Her face lit up when she saw his expression. "They loved it, didn't they?" "They did." His voice was quiet with amazement. "They really did." Later that evening, Derek sat at his small kitchen table, a celebration sandwich made with extra care in front of him. His hands shook slightly as he dialed Maya's number. She was at her aunt's house for dinner. "Daddy!" Maya's voice burst through the phone. "Aunt Sarah said you had a big meeting. Did you tell them your idea? Did they like it?" "They did, baby girl. They really liked it." Maya's squeal of delight was so loud he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I knew it. I knew you could do it." "Did you wear the tie I helped pick out?" "Sure did." Derek took a bite of his sandwich, letting his daughter's excitement wash over him. Her pride in him meant more than all the executive applause combined. "Can I tell my teacher tomorrow? She always says we should share good news with the class." "Of course you can, sweetheart." Derek smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those quiet dinners when he could barely afford to feed them both. "Daddy?" Maya's voice grew serious. "I'm really proud of you." Derek had to swallow hard before he could answer. "Thank you, baby. That means everything to me." The morning sunlight streamed through the office windows as Derek made his way to his desk, clutching his worn leather briefcase. He could feel the difference in the air, the weight of eyes following him, the shift in how people reacted to his presence. Yesterday's presentation to the board had changed something. "Did you hear?" a young accountant whispered to her colleague as Derek passed. "The night clerk saved the company thousands with his supplier idea." Her voice held a note of surprised admiration. "Well, I guess even a janitor can get lucky sometimes," her colleague replied with a dismissive sniff. Derek kept walking, his face carefully neutral. The words stung, but he'd learned long ago how to wear dignity like armor. He reached his desk and began organizing his files for the day, trying to focus on the positive. The board had listened. They'd actually listened. Claire appeared at his desk, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her smile was warm, but he noticed the tension around her eyes. "Thought you could use this after yesterday's excitement," she said, setting 1 cup down. "Thanks, Claire." He took a grateful sip. "Everything okay?" She sank into the chair beside his desk, her shoulders dropping slightly. "Oh, you know how at Island? Martha from accounting asked if I was slumming it by being your friend." Claire's attempt at a laugh came out hollow. "I told her I prefer the company of genuine people over pretentious ones." Derek frowned. "You shouldn't have to deal with that because of me." "Don't you dare," Claire said firmly. "I choose my own friends, thank you very much, and I'm proud to be yours." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of inter-office mail. The delivery clerk dropped a stack of papers on Derek's desk without making eye contact. Derek began sorting through them, his brow furrowing as he noticed several important documents were missing. "That's strange," he muttered. "The Henderson contract was supposed to be here this morning. And where's the supplier analysis I requested?" Claire's expression darkened. "Third time this week something's gone missing. I'll check with records." Throughout the morning, Derek noticed the pattern continuing. In meetings, his suggestions were met with polite nods, only to be praised minutes later when repeated by other employees. His emails went mysteriously unanswered. Small things, really, but they added up like grains of sand in an hourglass, weighing him down. During lunch, he overheard 2 executives talking in the break room. Collins did well with that supplier situation, one said. But let's not get carried away. He's not exactly executive material. Exactly, the other replied. I mean, can you imagine him in the boardroom, with clients? Derek stirred his coffee, letting the familiar ache wash over him. He'd faced this his entire life, the constant need to prove himself, to be twice as good for half the credit. But now, for the first time, he had a real chance to change things. Claire found him later that afternoon, working through a stack of reports. You okay? She asked softly. Just tired, he replied, managing a small smile. But I'm not giving up. Good. She squeezed his shoulder. Because you're making a difference, Derek. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. The afternoon dragged into evening, shadows lengthening across his desk as Derek worked to catch up on everything that had been misplaced or overlooked. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Made you something special. Don't work too late, Daddy. Finally, well past dinner time, Derek gathered his things and headed home. The bus ride was quiet, giving him time to think about the day's ups and downs. He thought about Maya, about the pride in her voice when he'd told her about his presentation. That made it all worth it. The apartment was dark when he unlocked the door, except for the small kitchen light they always left on. As he set down his briefcase, he noticed Maya slumped over the kitchen table, fast asleep. Her math homework was spread out around her, and beside it lay a colorful drawing. Derek moved closer, his heart swelling as he saw what she'd created. The picture showed him in a suit and tie, standing tall in front of what looked like the office building. Above it, in careful rainbow letters, she'd written, "Proud of my dad." He stood there for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, taking in her peaceful face and the innocent pride expressed in her artwork. Despite the day's challenges, despite the whispers and the subtle discrimination, this moment reminded him exactly why he was fighting so hard. Gently, he lifted Maya into his arms, just like he used to when she was smaller. She stirred slightly but didn't wake as he carried her to her bedroom. After tucking her in, he returned to the kitchen and carefully picked up her drawing, smoothing out the corners where they'd started to curl. This, he decided, would go on his desk tomorrow. A reminder that no matter what obstacles he faced, he had the most important person in his corner. And for Maya, he would keep pushing forward, keep proving them wrong, one small victory at a time. Rain pelted against the windows of Metropolitan Solutions Incorporated as Derek Collins stepped into the lobby, shaking water from his umbrella. The security guard who usually greeted him with a friendly nod kept his eyes down, pretending to be absorbed in his morning newspaper. Something felt off. As Derek walked through the maze of cubicles toward his desk, conversations died. Heads turned away. Phones suddenly became fascinating to their users. The silence felt heavy, unnatural. Claire Anderson rushed toward him, her face pale with worry. "Derek, we need to talk." She grabbed his arm, steering him toward the break room. Her fingers trembled against his sleeve. "What's wrong?" Derek asked, his stomach tightening. Before Claire could answer, his eyes caught sight of a paper someone had left on the break room table. His heart stopped. There, in stark black and white, was his own face 20 years younger, bruised, angry. The old mugshot stared back at him accusingly. "Someone leaked it to the entire office," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "They're saying you have a criminal record." Derek's hands shook as he picked up the paper. The memories flooded back: the peaceful protest against police brutality, the chaos that erupted, the wrongful arrest that was later dismissed. But here was only the mugshot, stripped of context, stripped of truth. "Who did this?" His voice came out hoarse. "I think it was Thompson," Claire said, naming one of the senior executives who'd opposed his promotion. "He's been digging into your past ever since your presentation to the board." The sound of whispers drifted in from the hallway. Derek caught fragments. "Can't believe they hired." Criminal element. Knew something wasn't right. He sank into a chair, the weight of 20 years of fighting stereotypes and prejudice crushing down on him. All his hard work, his dignity, his careful steps forward wiped away by one grainy photo from the past. "Maya," he whispered, thinking of his daughter. "She has school today. What if the other kids?" Claire pulled up a chair beside him. "We'll fight this, Derek. We'll tell them the truth." But Derek could only think of Maya's proud face when he'd told her about his presentation to the board. How she'd drawn that picture. My dad, the businessman. Now, what would she face? What would her teachers think? What would her friends say? Throughout the morning, Derek tried to work, but the sideways glances and hushed conversations followed him everywhere. His inbox filled with emails about concerns and reviews. Even the cleaning staff, his former colleagues, avoided his eyes. By lunch, the story had grown. Someone claimed he'd been involved in gang activity. Another whispered about theft. The truth, twisted and mutated with each retelling, growing darker, more sinister. Claire brought him coffee, tried to make him eat something, but food tasted like ashes in his mouth. "Don't let them win," she urged. "You've done nothing wrong." But the damage was done. In the afternoon, he overheard two executives outside his office. Background checks should have caught this. Can't have someone like that representing the company. Someone like that. The words echoed in his head as he packed up his briefcase early, unable to bear another minute under the weight of those stairs. The rain had grown heavier as he drove home, matching his dark thoughts. The apartment was quiet when he entered, too quiet. He didn't turn on the lights, just sat in his old armchair in the darkness, listening to the rain against the windows. This was how Maya found him when she came home from her after-school program. She switched on the lamp, flooding the room with soft light. Her face, so much like her mother's, showed a wisdom beyond her years. "Mrs. Johnson showed me the picture today," she said quietly, climbing onto the arm of his chair. "She said some parents were asking questions." Derek's heart cracked. "Baby, I'm so sorry." "I told her my daddy is the best man I know," Maya interrupted, her small hand finding his in the semi-darkness. She squeezed his fingers. "And that sometimes good people get hurt by bad things, but that doesn't make them bad." Tears burned in Derek's eyes as Maya leaned against him. His daughter, his beacon of hope, refusing to be ashamed of him. "Don't give up, Daddy," she whispered, and in those 4 simple words, he heard his wife's strength, his mother's wisdom, and his own heart's truth. But sitting there in the darkened apartment, Maya's small hand in his, Derek had never felt more broken. The rain continued to fall outside, matching the tears he couldn't let his daughter see. Saturday morning arrived with a heavy silence. Derek Collins sat at his small kitchen table, the gentle hum of the refrigerator his only companion. Maya was still asleep in her room, her soft breathing occasionally drifting through the thin walls of their modest apartment. His fingers hovered over the laptop keyboard, the cursor blinking accusingly on the blank document. "Dear Mr. Hughes," he typed, then backspaced. "To whom it may concern," he tried again, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. Sunlight crept through the worn curtains, casting long shadows across the scattered newspapers on the table. Each one screamed the same story. His story, twisted and ugly. The old mugshot from his youth stared back at him, a reminder of a protest gone wrong, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. 25 years ago felt like yesterday now. He glanced at Maya's door, his heart heavy. Yesterday she'd come home from school with red eyes, trying to hide that she'd been crying. Some kids had teased her about the newspaper stories. "Is your dad really a criminal?" they'd asked. The memory made his hands shake as he continued typing. "After careful consideration, I believe it is in the best interest of the company if I tender my resignation, effective immediately." The words blurred as tears threatened to spill. Everything he'd worked for, every late night studying those business textbooks, every moment of pride when Maya saw him in his tie instead of his janitor's uniform, it all seemed to crumble around him. At 8 o'clock, he gently woke Maya. "Baby girl, I need to go to church for a while. Will you be okay with Mrs. Rodriguez next door?" Maya nodded, her eyes searching his face. "Are you going to pray about the bad pictures, Daddy?" His throat tightened. "Yeah, baby, I am." The old brick church stood quiet and dignified against the morning sky. Inside, the familiar scent of wood polish and ancient hymnals wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. Derek slipped into the last pew, his head bowed low. "Lord," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the empty sanctuary. "I don't know what to do anymore. I tried to rise above, to show Maya that dignity and hard work matter. But maybe I was reaching too high." The sound of footsteps echoed through the church. Derek didn't look up, assuming it was the pastor doing his morning preparations, but then a familiar voice spoke softly beside him. "I thought I might find you here." Claire Anderson stood in the aisle, her face etched with concern. She wore casual clothes instead of her usual office attire, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Without asking permission, she slid into the pew beside him. "How did you know?" Derek asked, quickly wiping his eyes. "Because this is where good people come when they're hurting," she said simply. Her eyes fell to the folded paper in his hands, the printed resignation letter. "Please tell me you're not giving up." Derek stared at the cross at the front of the church. "What choice do I have, Claire? Maya's getting bullied at school. The executives look at me like I'm dirt again. Everything I built is falling apart. Remember that day in the break room?" Claire's voice was soft but intense. "I was at my lowest point. My ex-husband had taken everything, and I felt worthless. But you shared your lunch with me, not just the food, but your kindness, your dignity," Derek remembered. The memory of her tears, the simple act of breaking bread together, felt like a lifetime ago. "That day," Claire continued, her own eyes glistening now, "you gave me back my hope. You showed me that good people still exist, that kindness matters more than status or money." She reached over and touched his hand. "Now let me give that hope back to you." Derek's tears fell freely now. But the mugshot, the rumors, was anything they printed actually true? Were you really arrested for something terrible? "I was 19, he said quietly. "There was a protest against police brutality. Things got chaotic. They rounded up everyone in the area, but the charges were dropped the next day. I was just fighting for what was right." "Then why are you ashamed?" Claire's voice grew stronger. "That mugshot doesn't show a criminal. It shows a young man standing up for justice. The same man who works harder than anyone I know, who raises his daughter with such love, who shares his lunch with crying strangers." Derek looked down at the resignation letter, the words swimming before his eyes. "Maya deserves better than this controversy. Maya deserves a father who shows her how to face adversity with courage," Claire countered. "She deserves to see that truth and dignity win over lies and prejudice." The morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Derek remembered Maya's words from the night before. "Don't give up, Daddy." His daughter's faith in him. Claire's unwavering support. Maybe they saw something in him he struggled to see in himself. Standing slowly, Derek walked to the trash bin near the church entrance. He held the resignation letter over it, his hand trembling slightly. Claire watched silently from the pew, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of his doubts. The paper fell into the bin with a soft rustle, but even as Derek turned back to the pews, uncertainty still gnawed at his heart. The road ahead looked dark and daunting, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength to walk it. Monday morning arrived with a cold gray sky. Derek Collins straightened his tie in the office building's lobby mirror, his reflection showing a man both weary and determined. The security guard, who usually greeted him warmly, now averted his eyes. Derek's shoes clicked against the marble floor as he made his way to his desk, head held high despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. Whispers followed him through the hallway. "There he is," someone muttered. "Can you believe they haven't fired him yet?" Another voice carried across the open office space. Derek kept walking, his father's old advice echoing in his mind. "Your dignity ain't what they say about you. It's how you carry yourself when they say it." At his desk, a small sticky note waited. "Coffee at 10, C." Claire's familiar handwriting brought the first smile to his face since Friday. He tucked the note into his pocket and began his morning routine, methodically working through reports with the same attention to detail that had earned him praise just days ago. Around mid-morning, Claire appeared with 2 steaming cups. Behind her came Tom from accounting and Sarah from HR, both carrying folders as if they had business to discuss. But Derek knew better. These were the few who had looked him in the eye this morning, who hadn't turned away. "Those reports you filed last week saved us hours of reconciliation," Tom said loudly enough for nearby cubicles to hear. "Never seen them organized so well." Sarah nodded, adding, "And the supplier solution you proposed? The numbers show it could save us nearly $500,000 annually." Claire set the coffee on Derek's desk, her eyes warm with encouragement. "Some people might be looking at old pictures," she said firmly, "but we're looking at the man right in front of us." Derek's throat tightened. "I appreciate that," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know." Throughout the morning, small acts of support continued. A junior analyst stopped by to ask his advice on a project. The mail clerk made a point of delivering his papers personally, with a firm handshake. Each gesture helped straighten Derek's spine a little more. At lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Dad, Mrs. Peterson loved my essay. Can I read it to you tonight?" Attached was a photo of Maya beaming next to her teacher, holding up papers covered in her careful handwriting. That evening, after most workers had left, Maya bounced into his office, her backpack clutching her precious essay. Claire, who had stayed late specifically for this moment, sat nearby with an encouraging smile. "My Hero," by Maya Collins, Maya began, her voice clear and proud. "Some people think heroes wear capes or fight bad guys in movies, but my hero wears a tie and fights something harder. He fights to make people believe in him." Derek sat very still, watching his daughter read with such conviction. "My dad used to be a janitor. Some people looked right through him like he wasn't there, but he always told me that no job is small if you do it with pride. He worked hard and studied at night after tucking me in. Now he has a desk and helps make big decisions for his company." Maya's voice grew stronger. "Last week, someone tried to hurt my dad by showing an old picture from when he was young and got arrested at a protest. But my dad taught me that standing up for what's right isn't always easy. Sometimes it gets you in trouble, even when you're doing the right thing." Claire dabbed at her eyes with a tissue as Maya continued. "My hero isn't perfect. Sometimes he's tired, and sometimes he's scared. But he never gives up. He makes me breakfast every morning and helps me with homework every night. He showed me that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going anyway." Maya looked up at her father, her eyes shining. "My dad is my hero because he teaches me through his actions, not just his words. He shows me that kindness matters more than being important, that hard work matters more than being lucky, and that dignity means staying true to yourself even when others try to make you feel small." The office was silent when Maya finished. Derek opened his arms, and she ran into them, essay papers crinkling between them. "That was beautiful, baby girl," he whispered into her hair. Claire stood, wiping her eyes. "Maya, your father isn't just your hero. He's an inspiration to more people here than he knows." Just then, Derek's desk phone rang, cutting through the moment. He answered it, listening intently, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning." He hung up slowly. "What is it, Daddy?" Maya asked, still holding tight to him. "The board wants to meet with me tomorrow morning," Derek said quietly, "about everything that's happened." Claire stepped forward, her face determined. "Whatever they say, you're not alone in this, Derek. Not anymore." Maya hugged him fiercer. "Remember what you always tell me, Daddy? We're Collinses. We don't quit." Derek looked at his daughter's faith-filled face and Claire's steadfast support, feeling strength flow back into his spirit. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight, in this moment, he was reminded of what really mattered and what was worth fighting for. The mahogany doors of the boardroom loomed before Derek Collins like ancient gates of judgment. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the brass handle, but he steadied it, remembering Maya's words from that morning. "You're the bravest person I know, Daddy." Inside, the grand boardroom stretched out before him, dominated by a massive oak table that gleamed under soft, recessed lighting. 15 executives sat in high-backed leather chairs, their faces a mix of stern disapproval and careful neutrality. Chairman Walters, his silver hair catching the morning light from the floor-to-ceiling windows, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Derek's footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor as he made his way to the single chair placed at the far end of the table. The weight of their stares pressed against him like a physical force. He smoothed his tie, the same one Maya had helped him pick out that morning, and took his seat. "Mr. Collins," Chairman Walters began, his deep voice filling the room. "You know why you're here. These allegations about your past have caused quite a stir. What do you have to say for yourself?" Derek looked down at his hands for a moment, weathered from years of hard work. When he raised his eyes again, they held a quiet strength that made even the most skeptical executive shift in their seat. "I could tell you what you want to hear," Derek began, his voice low but clear. "I could make excuses or beg for mercy, but that's not who I am. The truth is simple and sometimes hard." He straightened in his chair, shoulders back, dignity intact. "I grew up in poverty, but my mama taught me that being poor didn't mean being without pride. When I was younger, I joined a peaceful protest against unfair housing practices in my neighborhood. The police arrested several of us that day, but the charges were dropped because we'd done nothing wrong. That mugshot you've all seen? It's part of my story, but it's not my whole story." Claire Anderson slipped into the room quietly, taking a position near the wall. Her presence gave Derek strength to continue. "I married my high school sweetheart, Sarah. We had our daughter Maya. Life was good until cancer took Sarah when Maya was just 4. His voice caught slightly, but he pressed on. "I became both mother and father to my little girl. Every job I could find, I took, including becoming a janitor here. Because when you're a parent, pride takes a back seat to putting food on the table." Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Every night, I'd study after Maya went to sleep. Every morning, I'd come to work early to watch how this company operated. I learned from watching you all, how you handled problems, made decisions, treated people. When I got the chance to become a clerk, I poured everything I had into proving myself worthy of that trust." Claire stepped forward. "If I may speak, Chairman?" At Walter's nod, she continued. "Mr. Collins first showed me who he truly was when I was at my lowest. He shared his lunch with me when I hadn't eaten all day, though I later learned he went hungry himself. That's the kind of man he island." The door opened again, and 3 more employees entered. Johnson from accounting, Maria from HR, and Pete from maintenance. They lined up behind Derek's chair. "Mr. Collins helped me understand complex spreadsheets during night shift," Johnson offered. "Never made me feel stupid for asking questions. He created a better filing system for our department," Maria added. "Saved us hours of work every week," Pete spoke up last. "And he still helps clean up when things get messy, even though he's not the janitor anymore. Never too proud to pitch in." Derek looked at his supporters with grateful eyes before turning back to the board. "I know some people think I don't belong here. Maybe they're right. I don't have the right background or the right connections. But I do have something that can't be taught in any business school. I understand the value of every person in this building, from the cleaning staff to the CEO, because I've walked in different shoes." Chairman Walters leaned forward, his aged hands folded on the table. "And what would you say to those who claim your past makes you unsuitable for advancement in this company?" Derek met his gaze steadily. "I'd say, look at my present. Look at how I've lived every day since walking through these doors. Judge me by how I treat others, how I solve problems, how I face challenges. My past taught me resilience. Being a single father taught me patience and sacrifice. Being a janitor taught me humility and the importance of doing every job well, no matter how small." The room fell silent. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Derek sat quietly, his dignity intact, whatever the outcome might be. Chairman Walters cleared his throat. "Mr. Collins, the board will need to deliberate on this matter. Please wait outside." Derek rose from his chair, straightened his tie one last time, and walked toward the door with his head held high. His supporters followed him out, each offering a supportive pat or smile as they dispersed. In the hallway, a small figure burst from around the corner. Maya, still in her school uniform, ran straight into his arms. Derek caught her in a tight embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I couldn't stay in school knowing you were here, Daddy," she whispered, clinging to him. "Miss Thompson let me leave early. Are you okay?" Derek hugged his daughter closer, finding in her presence all the strength he needed to face whatever came next. They stood together in the quiet hallway, waiting for the board's decision, father and daughter united against whatever storms might come. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the towering windows of the corporate building as Derek Collins stood outside the boardroom once again. His navy second-hand suit, though pressed carefully that morning, felt heavy on his shoulders. The weight of anticipation hung in the air like thick summer humidity. Claire Anderson waited beside him, her usual tired expression replaced with nervous energy. "Whatever happens in there," she whispered, squeezing his arm, "you've already won by staying true to yourself." Maya, dressed in her school uniform, clutched her father's hand. Her small fingers intertwined with his larger ones, offering silent support. The security guard had made an exception to let her up to this floor. Something about the chairman's specific request. The boardroom doors opened. A young assistant gestured them inside, where 12 executives sat around the massive oak table. The chairman, Mr. Patterson, stood at the head, his expression unreadable. Derek's heart thundered in his chest as he guided Maya to a chair near the wall. "Mr. Collins," Patterson began, his voice echoing in the hushed room. "Yesterday, you shared your story with us. Today, we share our decision with you." Derek stood straight, chin lifted slightly. The same quiet dignity he'd maintained while mopping these very floors not so long ago. "First," Patterson continued, "we want to apologize. The leak of your past arrest was unauthorized and inappropriate. We've identified the responsible party, and they no longer work here." A ripple of murmurs crossed the room. Derek noticed several executives shifting uncomfortably in their leather chairs. "But that's not why we called you here." Patterson moved around the table, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. "Mr. Collins, over the past months, we've watched you rise from janitor to clerk. We've seen you face discrimination with grace. We've witnessed your innovative solutions save this company millions. But most importantly, we've observed your character." Derek felt Maya's presence behind him, her proud smile warming his back like sunshine. "The board has been searching for a new company president," Patterson announced. "Someone with vision, integrity, and real understanding of people at every level. Yesterday, your words in this room proved what some of us already suspected." He paused, a slight smile crossing his usually stern face. "We don't need to look any further." The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning registered. Derek's knees weakened slightly. Claire gasped softly from her position near the door. "Mr. Collins," Patterson extended his hand, "we would like to offer you the position of company president." The room spun slightly. Derek heard Maya's small squeal of delight, felt Claire's supportive presence, but for a moment, all he could see was his wife's face from years ago, telling him to never stop believing in miracles. His voice cracked with emotion. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm honored, but why me?" Patterson's expression softened. "Because you've shown us what true leadership looks like, not through fancy degrees or connections, but through actions. You shared your lunch with a hungry colleague when you barely had enough yourself. You solved problems others couldn't see because you understood every level of this company. You faced adversity with dignity and rose above it." Tears welled in Derek's eyes, but he didn't hide them. They were tears of validation, of years of struggle finally bearing fruit. "Most importantly," Patterson continued, "you've shown us that character and compassion aren't weaknesses in business. They're strengths we desperately need." The board members began to stand, one by one, offering respectful nods. Even those who had once dismissed him now looked at him with new eyes. "The salary and benefits package is substantial," Patterson added, sliding a folder across the table. "Though something tells me that's not what matters most to you." Derek touched the folder gently, thinking of Maya's college fund, of finally being able to move them out of their tiny apartment. But Patterson was right. It wasn't about the money. What matters most, Derek said, his voice strong and clear, is the chance to prove that everyone deserves an opportunity to rise, regardless of where they start. Patterson smiled. Then I believe we've chosen correctly. He turned to the board. All in favor? Aye, came the unanimous response, echoing off the walls. Maya couldn't contain herself any longer. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around her father's waist. You did it, Daddy. You really did it. Derek lifted her up, despite her being almost too big for such gestures. Their tears mingled as they hugged, years of shared struggles dissolving in a moment of triumph. Claire stepped forward, her own eyes glistening. She had been there from the beginning, from that first shared lunch that had started it all. Derek reached out and pulled her into their embrace. We did it, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We really did it. The afternoon sun streamed through the boardroom windows, casting a golden glow over the three of them. In that moment, standing in the very room where he'd once cleaned floors in the early morning hours, Derek Collins held his daughter and his dearest friend, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories come not from climbing over others, but from lifting them up along the way. Early morning sunlight streamed through the vast windows of the executive floor, painting golden stripes across polished hardwood floors. Derek Collins stood at the threshold of what was now his office, his hand resting on the brass doorknob. The nameplate already bore his name, Derek Collins, President. His fingers trembled slightly as he pushed open the heavy oak door. The office that had once seemed as distant as the moon now welcomed him with its leather chairs and mahogany desk. How many times had he emptied the waste paper baskets in here, invisible to the previous occupant? Maya had helped him pick out his new suit yesterday, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes. You look like a superhero, Daddy, she'd said, straightening his navy blue tie. Now, as he stepped into the spacious room, he carried her pride with him like a shield. The desk seemed to stretch for miles. Derek ran his hand along its smooth surface, remembering all the nights he'd polished it to a mirror shine. A framed photo of Maya already sat in pride of place, next to a small potted plant Claire had given him as a congratulatory gift. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Claire stood there, holding a stack of folders and wearing a warm smile. Ready for your first morning meeting, Mr. President? Please, Derek chuckled. It's still just Derek. He gestured for her to enter, noticing how different things felt from this side of the desk. Though I have to admit, this all feels like a dream. A dream you earned, Claire said firmly, setting the folders down. And speaking of dreams, I've drafted the outline for your compassion initiative, just as we discussed. Derek opened the top folder, scanning the details they'd worked on together over the weekend. The initiative would create opportunities for people society often overlooked: single parents, former inmates seeking redemption, individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. It would offer flexible schedules, childcare support, and mentorship programs. I've already received 15 applications, Claire reported, her eyes bright with excitement. Word spreads fast when hope is in the air. Before Derek could respond, a group of department heads filed in for the morning meeting. He recognized faces that had once barely acknowledged his existence. Now they sat attentively, notepads ready, as he stood to address them. Good morning, Derek began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Today marks a new chapter for this company. We're launching what I call the Compassion Initiative. He shared his vision, speaking from experience about the untapped potential in people who just needed a chance. To his surprise, heads nodded in agreement. The marketing director, who had once dismissed him as just the janitor, raised her hand. This could revolutionize our corporate culture, she said. I'd like to volunteer my department as the first to implement the new hiring practices. Other department heads quickly followed suit. The room buzzed with ideas and enthusiasm. Claire quietly took notes, but Derek caught her proud smile. By lunchtime, the initiative was already gaining momentum. HR had begun reviewing applications, and the company's social media channels were flooded with positive responses. Derek sat at his desk, still somewhat amazed by how quickly things were moving. A familiar aroma wafted through his open door: fried chicken and cornbread. Claire entered carrying 2 lunch containers, a knowing look in her eyes. "Thought we could celebrate properly," she said, setting them down. Same recipe as that day in the break room. Derek felt his throat tighten with emotion as they shared the meal, now as president and trusted advisor rather than janitor and secretary. Through the wide windows, he could see the city stretching out below, bathed in midday Sunday, the same view he used to glimpse while washing these very windows. "Did you ever imagine that sharing your lunch would lead to all this?" Claire asked softly, watching him take in the view. Derek shook his head, thinking back to that day when he'd found her crying in the break room. He'd only wanted to ease someone else's hunger, the way he'd so often had to hide his own. "I just did what felt right," he said simply. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors. Employees who'd never spoken to him before now sought his advice and shared their stories. A young mailroom clerk tearfully thanked him for giving people like her hope. The maintenance staff stopped by with congratulations, pride evident in their faces as they saw one of their own in the president's chair. Derek handled each interaction with the same quiet dignity that had carried him through years of being overlooked. He listened more than he spoke, made notes of concerns and ideas, and treated everyone with the respect he'd always wished to receive. As the day wound down, Derek stood at the window, watching the setting sun paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The office had gradually emptied, leaving him alone with his thoughts. On his desk lay approved plans for the Compassion Initiative, employee applications waiting to be reviewed, and Maya's latest drawing, a crayon masterpiece showing her father in a suit, standing tall. The same city stretched out before him as always, but now he viewed it from a different height. Not because he was higher up in the building, but because he'd risen above the limitations others had tried to place on him. His reflection in the window showed a man transformed not by his title, but by the journey that had brought him here. That simple lunch shared months ago had been more than just a meal. It had been a moment of genuine human connection, a reminder that kindness could bridge any divide. Now, as president, he had the power to multiply that kindness, to create ripples of change that could transform countless lives. Claire's words from the morning echoed in his mind. Word spreads fast when hope is in the air. Looking out over the city, Derek smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to prove that compassion was the strongest foundation for success. The grand hall of the Morrison Building sparkled with soft lighting from crystal chandeliers. Round tables draped in cream-colored linens filled the space, each decorated with fresh flower centerpieces. The aroma of expertly prepared food wafted through the air as servers moved gracefully between tables. 10-year-old Maya Collins stood at the podium, her yellow dress matching her bright smile. Her small hands gripped the microphone as she looked out at the crowd of executives, managers, clerks, and maintenance staff, all seated together without the usual divisions of rank or status. "My daddy taught me that kindness matters more than anything else," Maya said, her voice clear and strong. "When I was little, he would skip meals so I could eat. But he never complained. He just smiled and told me everything would be okay." She paused, looking at Derek, who sat at the main table. "Now I get to tell everyone that my father is not just the company president, he's the kindest man I know." Applause filled the hall as Maya rushed back to her seat between Derek and Claire. Derek pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head while trying to hide the tears in his eyes. The servers brought out plates of carefully prepared chicken, seasoned with herbs and served alongside golden cornbread, a deliberate menu choice that made Claire Anderson smile knowingly. She sat in her deep blue dress, watching as executives chatted warmly with maintenance staff and department heads shared jokes with security guards. When it was Derek's turn to speak, he stood slowly, straightening his tie. The room fell silent. "A few months ago, I stood in this building with a mop in my hands," he began, his deep voice carrying across the hushed room. "I was invisible to most of you, but that was okay, because I knew who I was, a father trying his best to give his daughter a better life." He gestured to the gathered crowd. Look around you tonight. See how we're all sitting together, sharing food and conversation? This is what happens when we choose to see each other as human beings first, titles second. Derek's gaze found Claire, and his expression softened. There's someone special I need to thank. Claire Anderson saw me when others looked past me. She shared my table when I had nothing but a simple lunch to offer. She believed in me when doubt was easier than faith. He raised his glass. Claire, you didn't just give me a chance at success. You showed me that hope is stronger than fear, and kindness can change lives. Claire dabbed at her eyes with her napkin as applause erupted again. Around the room, people began sharing their own stories. The security guard who Derek had helped during a family emergency, the intern whose college tuition he'd quietly arranged to support, the cleaning staff he'd insisted receive full benefits. The evening flowed with laughter and conversation. Former barriers melted away as people discovered common ground over shared meals. A junior executive's child played pat-a-cake with a janitor's daughter. The head of accounting swapped recipes with a maintenance worker. As the formal dinner wound down, Derek, Claire, and Maya found themselves at a small table in the corner. Before them sat 3 plates of fried chicken and cornbread, identical to the lunch Derek had shared with Claire months ago. Remember that day in the break room? Claire asked softly, breaking off a piece of cornbread. How could I forget? Derek replied, watching Maya happily bite into her chicken. I had 2 pieces of chicken and some cornbread. It wasn't much, but it was everything, Claire finished. Because it wasn't about the food, it was about dignity, about seeing someone hurting and choosing to help. Maya looked between them, her eyes bright with understanding beyond her years. And now we're all having dinner together, she said, like a family. Derek glanced at Claire, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared warmth. The simple meal before them held so much meaning, a reminder of where they'd started and how far they'd come. Around them, the grand hall still buzzed with conversation and laughter, but at their small table, they had created their own quiet celebration of hope, friendship, and second chances. The chicken and cornbread tasted just as good as that first shared lunch, but now it was seasoned with something more. The flavor of triumph over adversity, of dignity restored, and of hearts open to possibility. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Derek Collins, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.